This is Signal and Noise, bringing clarity to data, tech, and AI.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Signal and Noise. This is our first episode back recording on Zencastr versus Riverside. Not that people care, but if the sound sounds different,
you know who to blame.
You know who to blame. I'm Brett House. This is my co-host, Rio Longacre. Today, we are thrilled to have Marc Sabatini, who a lot in the ad tech and martech industry probably already know. He is the newly announced co-founder and chief commercial officer at HighSignals, my company. I promise not to shill and sell my vendor, the vendor that I'm helping to run.
But you're going to anyway, right?
Yeah. We're B2B SaaS AI companies turn GTM strategy into clearer commercial execution. That's really what Marc and I have been focusing on. We met at the AdTech God Party via Rio. Rio said, you, Marc, need to speak to Brett. And next thing you know, we had a long conversation. And a few months later, hung out at CES together. We decided to work together to launch this organization. So it's been quite a ride. So just as a quick backdrop, Marc has spent 3 decades in ad tech, martech, data, enterprise growth roles, right? Companies like you're the chief strategy officer of Aquifer, right?
Absolutely.
And a co-founder, and Data Axle as well. I think the title was about the same, right?
Absolutely.
And you've held some leadership roles at Epsilon and Analytics IQ. So you certainly know the industry. You've been a chief revenue officer. You've run an organization or helped run an organization called the CRO Collective, which has you educating CROs globally. Madrid, London. I've heard of a lot of exotic and wonderful places that you've been to recently. So welcome to the show, Marc. Thrilled to have you. And let the audience know a little bit about yourself in your own words.
Sure. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Brett and Rio. And it's good to be here. It's good to be on the show with you guys. Brett, as you said, I've been in the business for 30 years now. So I've seen a lot of change over time when it comes to product capabilities. And just, I think through that natural evolution, I always believe that every day I need to be learning something new. Years ago, it was always products. Like, how do I understand the product more? The changes in the ecosystem, how ad tech started to come to the forefront and all the changes that have rapidly been happening year over year. But, as time went on, it really started to dovetail more into, the go-to-market side of things, because, at the end of the day, we're not out there, trying to pitch our product. We're actually trying to solve problems, right? And I think if everybody takes away one thing from this conversation today, look for companies that have the problems that your outcomes solve for, and focus the capabilities you have and the outcomes you deliver to solve the problems they have. And you won't be selling anything, you'll just be delivering outcomes that solve problems. And I think the number one challenge I get from salespeople, trying to get their products in somewhere is, I'm trying to sell this and I can't get them to want to buy this. And as opposed to really focusing more on the challenges that somebody has and the relationship that you can build with them. And that's really what it comes down to. But my experience at Aquifer, as a co-founder there and in the first year, essentially being out there almost on my own, trying to get the revenue for the business to accelerate and start. I was facing one go-to-market challenge after another because they were all falling on my shoulders, right? When you think of go-to-market, you're thinking about not only sales, but marketing, customer success. Today, we might talk about revenue operations, but at the end of the day, it's how do I collect all of this information about my activities so that the data itself about my actions and my activity can start to rise to the top and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And, in many of the books you'll read about go-to-market, it talks about a broken system between sales, marketing, and customer success. And in the startup, that's all you, right? So it's really broken because you're just one person trying to deal with each one of those core areas. In a larger company, there are deep and wide silos that organizations face where, marketing and sales are just they're set up on completely different paths where, bonuses and goals and metrics are not only timed at different times of the year, but sometimes they're counterintuitive.
Yeah, it could be incentive misalignment, process misalignment.
Absolutely. And then when you start to think about customer success, any person watching this episode who's responsible to run or grow a business, at the end of the day, the best place to focus is your existing customers, right? You want to take those existing customers. Number one, you want to make sure that they don't leave. So you're delivering with excellence and you're managing that relationship. But you also want to make sure that there's more that you can provide to them to solve more problems. And what people don't realize is that, yes, while I need quality, educated, and competent people on customer success to know how to deal with my customers, it really goes back to the beginning when you're profiling your ideal customer profile to say, I'm focused on bringing customers in that actually have the ability to grow and that they don't just need the one product that my salesperson decided to talk to them about. So
Mark,
really is a full cycle.
Yeah, like Mark, I love the way this is going already, right? So I agree with you 100%. It is not an easy thing to do, regardless of company size. I've seen it at big companies where the silo thing you discussed, the handoffs to marketing, sales, service, success, like totally broken or non-existent, especially when you add in a partner channel, and small companies too. So I think this will be a fun discussion. And for those who haven't seen it, like Brett put out a couple posts recently on what he's calling the go-to-market slop series. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. It's on signalandnoise.ai. It really talks about one of the problems we're going to be delving into now, I think some of the outcomes that aren't so great from some go-to-market motions we see where that result in launches failing, like failure to launch, just call it, right? Brett gave some good examples of companies that have succeeded and explained why. Gives some examples of what he sees as the go-to-market slop. And Mark, we thought you'd be great at this because you've been doing this a long time. You're one of the, I think, the better known people in the world of ad tech and martech. And we ran into each other a few years ago, right? I think down in Miami at Possible, right? And thought this would be a great discussion to talk about what happens, like from your point of view, as someone who's been in the trenches doing this. You've been an operator, right, at different types of companies. What happens when there's a fuzzy narrative? What happens when there's no poorly defined ICP? When things haven't been validated? When you have to improvise, what do you do, right? When you don't know these things. So I guess getting your perspective on this, we thought this would be a lot of fun and looking at how does that relate to the dimensions of go-to-market. So. Sure. With that, let's maybe dive into some questions. We have some good ones that we'll ask you about different things in your background. I think, Brett, you had the first question, right?
Yeah. Where do you think, thank you for referencing before I ask the question, thank you for asking referencing the go-to-market slop series. And I did write that for really the purpose that I've seen or the things that I've seen in a lot of tech, B2B SaaS, tech, AI organizations throughout my career, 30 years, is sort of a lack of commercial coherence, or at least consistent commercial coherence from the release or development of a product, even MVP and beta, all the way through the actual commercial motions. And I find it's almost like, and I've said this a bunch of times on the podcast, and I've seen this, in real life, and I'm sure you've seen this, Mark, as well. It's like Chinese whispers, right? Like you say something into, one person whispers something into somebody else's ear, and by the time it goes around the table, it's a completely different story. And so I found that often is where the incoherence commercially happens, and the product people know the product deeply, but it's not being consistently delivered through these sometimes gatekeepers. Sometimes product marketing acts as a gatekeeper that then goes to sales, or solutions engineering that then goes to customer success, and it seems like there's breakage. And by the time you get to customer success, delivering accounts or delivering growth to accounts or solutions to accounts, oftentimes they're 3 or 4 steps removed from the actual capabilities or potentially what the salespeople were selling in market, right? So then there's a disconnect, and the client's going, "Wait a minute, like this is what I was promised," and that's classic over-promising, under-delivering, or otherwise. But back to the question framework, I just wanted to mention that about the GTM Slop series and why I'm sort of writing this, because Mark and you and I both totally agree that this is a major issue. Where do you think the system, I sort of gave a kind of a long-winded sort of view of that, but where do you really think go-to-market breaks first? Where do you think is the first portion of that sort of falls down?
Well, like everything, it starts with leadership. But touching on your go-to-market slop, you can have slop when nobody knows anything about go-to-market and people are just pushing effort towards what they think is the right thing to do. But you can also have slop on the other end where everybody feels like they're educated and they're trying to do state-of-the-art or leading-edge go-to-market tactics, but there's no organization, there's no system, there's no coordination. It's like a football team going out on the field without a playbook, right? And the quarterback just yelling a number out and everybody just kind of runs in a whole bunch of different directions.
That's a good analogy.
We just described the New York Jets.
Yeah.
You're running a bunch of plays. They're not.
They look like plays.
They look like plays.
That's right. So, it really comes down to focus. And, a lot of what you're talking about with product, and most of the people that may be watching from ad tech and MarTech are coming from organizations that have product. Yes, there are a lot of service organizations out there and consultancies, but if the chief product officer in the product organization is developing something that they believe is going to be needed in market 6 months from now or a year from now, not only has that timeline gotten tighter, but you need the voice of the customer to help inform that. And voice of the customer comes from customer success, but also from sales. So as sales is out there testing the water on a new feature, listening to the challenges that buyers may be having with competitive offerings or the lack of an offering in market, having that clarity from all of these voice of the customer engagements provides a good product team with the right path to follow to get to a point where they'll have something that people need. And the work that I do with the CRO collective in training chief revenue officers, getting chief revenue officers together to talk about the challenges they have, but also fixing the system, it really focuses on how the chief revenue officer can be a strong partner to the chief product officer. And it is for that very reason. And it's not so much the roadmap to something new, but it's also sunsetting what's old, right? So this really starts to become a process where there's a lot of handoffs throughout the process. And what sits in the middle is marketing that is coming up with the messaging about those products, and more importantly, about the challenges that these outcomes solve for.
Well, hold on. So the question, let me dissect. So the answer to the question for what breaks first is the voice of customer. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's the system.
It's the system, right?
It's the lack of leadership.
If product are developing things that aren't aligned with actual customer need because they're a couple steps removed. I've talked to startup CEOs that have rolled customer success and account leadership teams into their product organization, which seems a weird way to retrofit to solve kind of a core problem that the product team didn't know enough about what was going on the client side of things, right? And in other cases, your commercial team suck in product resources into every other meeting with clients because of a lack of subject matter expertise, or just to get them to help close deals. And that's also a problem.
So the other piece there is training, learning and development, right? Because the reason why salespeople and customer success people pull product in is because they don't feel confident enough about what they need to talk about. And if you take your engagement with a prospect that you're trying to make into a lead, into a qualified opportunity, there's only so deep that you need to go on each one of those conversations. So if we educate the customer success and salesperson on how deep they need to go from hello to the prospect saying, yes, I'd like to learn more, which is your indicator that they, to set up the next call, now that they're ready to go that much deeper. But there's research that they have to do as part of this go-to-market process to truly understand how my offering fits in and solves that problem. So it's about education, because if I can educate my forward-facing team of sales, marketing, and customer success, then I don't need to bring product in. Product should not be in the conversation, in my opinion, actively selling until it's a qualified opportunity or ready to close, right?
Mark, speaking of education, I mean, a lot of people, I've run into many technical founders who are great at product and build great products. A lot of great products out there, right? But I think there's a misconception that just having a good product alone will win you business. That's enough. And my hypothesis, I'm curious to hear what your take on it is, that the best product won't win without a great go-to-market. That in fact, maybe like maybe great products table stakes, but it's not always the best product that wins. It's a good product. It's good enough with the best go-to-market. That's really what it takes, and that's why this is so important.
Yeah, and go-to-market is not just marketing. Let's make that super clear, right? It's not just a campaign. So you talk about the 3 Ps. I think that's relevant here.
Yeah, so the first stage of the 3 Ps, and I'll give some credit to Sangram Vajre, his book Move, and Go-to-Market Partners, which I'm trained in, and I'm a certified partner in their go-to-market operating system. The first of the 3 Ps is problem market fit, and that's
a new one, and that's very interesting.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like what most people on the call might know about, which is product market fit, which is a key indicator that investors want to know about. It's something that's required for you to truly be able to scale your organization. But problem market fit is you've got a solution that happens to solve a lot of problems, right? It's good enough, or it's generic enough, or it's full featured enough where your team can be going out to an ICP that, in my opinion, may be too wide, and you're generating revenue. But all of a sudden you turn around and you realize that when you start to put your clients in categories, you've got a lot of categories, right? People are using the product to solve this problem or that problem or another problem. And ultimately, to get to product market fit, which is the second P, you want to be able to align all of your go-to-market resources to focus on the market that needs that product to solve that problem. That's where you can scale. It's very hard to scale when you're in problem market fit. And then to the point that I brought up earlier about...
So start with the problem. Is to you, which is
you start with the problem to prove that your product works.
Yeah,
right?
and that's your sort of outside in. You're sort of not selling features and capabilities, which is the product. You're selling the why and the how you actually deliver value to a client.
Yeah, I believe that it's possible to immediately go in and have only clients that validate your product market fit. But more often than not, the really good founders that you were talking about before, Rio, who've got a great product and they come to market, I think you'll find that there's a lot of customers they bring in that are not going to go along with them for the long haul, because they were there to fit a need of driving revenue, to test the product out, to try things. We can go back to the book Crossing the Chasm of the adopters and so on and so forth. But ultimately, you want to be able to scale your business. And there are companies that are new that need to focus on how do I get to product market fit to scale. But there are mature companies that may have lost their demand because they have a lot of competitors, or the market has just changed and their product hasn't kept up with it, where they need a transformation. And that transformation is going to be hyper-focus on the ideal customer profile, which I know we're going to talk about today. But really, how do I get back to that product market fit? Because that's where the demand is going to come from. Because now all of the components of go-to-market are focused on one profile of a problem and one profile of a customer. And that's where your scale is going to come from. You can compete.
Well, the third P, you mentioned the third P, right? The platform.
And the third P goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, which is I want to pick prospects to help that have the need for many of the capabilities I have, or I know that as I help them in the early stage, they're going to grow and have a significant more demand for the product that I have. And that's where platform market fit comes into play, because now if I sold, something for them for $1, let's just use some simple numbers. The platform market fit, as I'm nurturing this relationship and delivering with excellence, now there's more features, functionality that they can buy because I know that they'll need them, or potentially the demand for what they need from the single piece of what I'm doing won't be $1 anymore. It'll be $10 or $100. But that's where the growth starts to come in. And we're not focused too much on ARR, but we can focus on NRR. And there's a lot of math out there that people can look up about the value of an additional dollar in an existing customer versus a net new dollar, and what it costs you to get that dollar versus growing into it. So scaling into the platform market fit is really something that is a part of the planning. Like if you know your product is going to evolve into several other features, that's a product-led growth approach, and we could talk about that in another time as well.
Well, and Rio, I don't know if you're familiar with, because these 3 Ps is just a retrofitting of a speech that Simon Sinek, I think, gave us a TED talk like 30 years ago, 20 years ago, which was the golden circle. And it's funny because you've told me this before, Mark, but what I realized is that the problem market fit is the why, the product market fit is the how, right, of this circle, right? And then the platform market fit is the what. Like, how does the actual platform deliver against the how you're doing this, and why should I care? Why is it delivering value?
Well, Brett, it's an interesting point you make about like it taking older concepts, not older, but taking really good concepts from the past and applying them to how you actually bring products and services to market. I actually think you brought up ICP, Mark, and I actually think there's a very similar analogy we can make with that, where the concept of CX, goes back a couple decades, right? I mean, Steve Jobs is kind of giving credit for founding it, right? With the whole concept of CX being, in order to build better products, services, and solutions, you look at the customer, you start with the customer once, and you work backwards, right? And it's that thinking that led to the iPod, the iPhone, and all these great products that the consumers loved, right? So I think what I really like about the concept of ICP and how you're wrapping into this, Mark, I love your thoughts on this, is I see ICP is the concept of taking CX, about looking at your customer and like creating the way that you go to market, the way you tell your narrative, the way you build and structure your organization and those handoffs, by really putting the customer in the center and like working backwards to the customer. Does that make sense? I love your thoughts on that.
Yeah. It, ultimately the individuals that we have, the experts in customer success, people who are trained and are constantly learning, they're active listeners, right? So we may have sold a certain product and we're delivering that product, and you have your weekly calls or however often your cadence is with your customer. In that conversation, there's other challenges that the customer's dealing with. And if you've picked the right prospect to solve their problem and you're now in the stage where they're your customer, you'll start to hear a lot of the same challenges that they're having. And it gives the opportunity for that customer or the customer success person to raise their hand and say, I can help you with that too. But it was all part of the plan from day one, because you knew you were going to get there. And the whole reverse process, as you're saying, is that if I understand that's the destination I'm going to, well, then how do I profile that business from hello so that I'm only talking to prospects that I can help that will become the types of customers that I can grow? Because it's very easy to sell a problem that I'm going to solve, back to problem market fit, to somebody that will never grow.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I keep thinking about that visual. I started to hammer on Simon Sinek, but it's most product organizations that I've been part of. In Rio, you made the point that super technical founders, they think in that if you're a product builder and a product leader, and there's a lot of them with Claude Code and the ability to vibe code today, putting products to market with really no commercial experience. And they tend to think in that what category, right? What it does, what its features are, what its capabilities are. I remember when I first joined Newstar, the deck that I was given to understand the company was 75 slides long, and a lot of workflows, a lot of interworking parts and pieces.
That was too much
of this marketecture, right? And so then you wonder why commercial teams often struggle to sort of define the thesis, the problem statement behind what they're delivering, because they're so stuck in what's been handed off from product, right, to them as just a kind of the what, answering the what, the platform story versus the why. Like, why should anyone give a shit? Why should anybody care? What value are you delivering? And then how do you actually do that? Do you have proof, case studies? Right. How do you actually deliver to companies like me or people like me in my function?
I think if you stack the value prop this way, and then you go with the ICP out, and you broaden the ICP, the value gets too generic as you go out, right? So if I'm talking to people who I know have the problems that my outcomes solve for, the value is believable, right? The more that I bring it out, it's harder for me to explain why you need this, right? And one of the things that anybody who's been a part of my sales teams, I talk about, if I find myself, trying to help somebody with a problem they didn't know they had, that's a long sales cycle, right? And
you got to convince the problem. It really is a problem.
Like, all the evidence is there, but I first have to convince them, or I have to educate them on why that's a problem for their business. And before I ever get to the point of how I solve it, right? So if I can focus, so it's not just employee size, sales volume, all the firmographics. It also, the second part of the ICP is all the education, all the research you're getting. So do you have some type of a tool or a process that's going to help you do a deep dive into what that business is dealing with right now? Because the other factor is whether I need to drive 100,000 in net new logos or net new revenue, or $100 million in net new revenue. The perspective of the market is going to be significantly bigger. But at the end of the day, how many deals do I actually need to close?
And how is AI changing this, Mark? I mean, because I'm looking here you describe a lot of things you're doing. Yeah. A lot of them are heavy research based, right? Talking to customers, which, that is super important. But is AI speeding this up? Is replacing some of it? Are people using synthetic research instead of like actual qualitative customer research? Like, what's actually happening in the field?
Yeah, no, it's both. And I think anybody who's on LinkedIn is seeing all these different, posts out there about tools that people are setting up to speed up a process, make it faster. But ultimately, this cycle,
virtual BDRs,
cycle,
agentic BDRs,
fits really well into what these tools are doing, because it's about going out, taking a path, experiencing that path, collecting the data from the experience you have, learning from it, and modifying the path. And that cycle of doing that over and over again, as well as using, the open web and all the other available information that's out there that these tools can bring to the table, the research is significant that you can bring to the table and generate your own signals and avoid the noise. Notice how I did that? And truly get in front of the right players at the right time. But it's
the adaptability
still at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think the adaptability and the adjustment periods have been compressed. I mean, in Pascalis mentioned this at CES, and Pascalis, Rio and I were talking to Sweet CES, and he was talking about GTM compression, meaning the decision cycles, the product life cycles are shrinking. Right, so you've got a lot of what I call like products being that are MVPs that are entering the market, right, which creates a lot of noise. And then the go-to-market cycles, like you have to figure out your 3 Ps, or your golden circle, your product, platform, and fit, rapidly. Because if you don't, somebody else is going to, and they're going to do it because they're leveraging the sort of decisioning and predictive capabilities of AI, which just compounds and speeds up, when appropriately applied, your decisioning, right? Because you can do competitive analysis at 100x the speed you're ever able to do competitive analysis. You could do persona analysis at 100x the speed. And to me, all of that's going to help you get quicker to something that delivers value, obviously human orchestrated, but that a message that delivers value to or perceived value to your end customer.
It's all a great point. We're all going to leverage it how we can. But many companies right now are dealing with a situation where what you just described is moving at such a fast pace. So it's like trying to merge onto an interstate highway. And, some companies, they're sitting in a fast car, right? Other companies, great product, great people, but they're trying to merge into that on a bicycle. Right. And it goes back to the first topic we talked about, which is the system in the organization. Because if you're in those silos and sales and marketing and CS don't work well together, and product doesn't know how to work with them, you'll never be able to accelerate this way. You have to work as a team and understand that as a team, you're all contributing to that repository of information that all these great tools sitting on top can start to deliver. Otherwise, you'll have great information, but the team won't be able to accelerate fast enough.
Hey, Mark, let's say you get hired at a small startup-y company, right? I don't know, like let's say the revenue is under $1 million, right? But accelerating quickly, good product. You get hired as the go-to-market. I'm curious to hear this. I know you've done this a couple of times, right? You've gone from zero to, in the case of Aquifer as well as Data Axle, you worked with both those companies very early on and brought, grew them significantly. So let's say you brought in as head of go-to-market. What's the first thing you do and what's the first hire you make?
Well, it's going to vary by company, but the first thing I do is do an assessment of go-to-market. And, there's plenty of documentation out there. I leverage the go-to-market partners documentation about the 15 most common go-to-market problems that you have. And if you come in and start talking with people who have been there and have been part of the growth, you can say, look, let's look at this list and understand what are the top 3 challenges that you believe the company's dealing with. And if you do that over 5 or 10 people, you start to see some common threads, whether it's heroic sales efforts or what causes it, sales marketing and customer success or not, working well together. It could be a product problem, so on and so forth. But that's what helps you to identify where to begin. The other piece is going back to leadership and saying, what's the number that we have to hit? Like, what's the next stage in growth in the near term? But more importantly, if you're talking to the CEO of the company, what's the long-term vision? Are we going to sell the company in 2 years, 3 years? Are we looking for more investment? Each one of those milestones, 2 or 3 years out, require you to work backwards and decide what you have to work on today. Because many of those steps take years to get into motion. So those are some of the things that come out of it. The next thing is to pressure test the existing customers. What's the churn rate? What's the ability to drive incremental growth from an existing customer? Some of the easy questions to the customer success team are, who was the economic buyer when when the company sold this deal in, right? Now, do they actually understand what an economic buyer is? Do they know who it was, whether it's a deal that happened in the last 12 months or it was 5 years ago? And why is that important? Because we want to focus on customer time to value. And the question that you want to go back to is, why did they pick you? What was the value prop that they said, this is why I want to pick you? And one of the most important steps you can do in customer success is focusing on customer time to value, because all day, every day, you want to prove to people why they picked you, right? And if I can continue on that cycle, I'm continuing to drive value with the people who picked us. And if there's something new, a new project, I better do the same thing. Why? And then I want everybody to know why. But it comes back to ROI. And we all know products that save us money or save us time. And those sound like very important value propositions. But ultimately, in your ICP, you want to focus on targets, customers, buyers, where your offering can bring a transformational ROI to their business. If they pick you and they work with you, it's actually going to transform how their business works. And that's significantly more valuable than I just saved you some time and money. And those are the types of things I would look at. And based on that analysis, I would know whether I need to hire a better person in CS, a marketer who can tell that story better, because I'll identify that it's actually a messaging problem, or potentially somebody who understands how to get their arms around this and get the next 2 deals in, so we have more revenue to continue to hire on the go-to-market team.
Well, and I'll tell you, you made a bunch of good points there. Let's unpack that a little bit. Is I'll challenge you on the messaging front. I think most CEOs of companies that are $1 million or less will say messaging in general is bullshit. And the reason why I say that is it comes across as too much fluff, as too not close enough to the actual client narrative. Like, what do they really need? How are you solving some of their hard problems, and how are you delivering value? And I think that's actually that narrative, which is, I think, just a deeper way at looking at messaging. Messaging to me comes across as this is the brand messaging. This is how it's appearing on the homepage or appearing in a press release. but it seems so disconnected from the actual hard client problems, which oftentimes is the complaint with your branding agencies, your PR agencies, and your marketing teams. In a lot of cases, the marketing generalists that don't have the product expertise to sort of know the deep, characteristics of the product and how it delivers value, and they don't have the commercial expertise to actually deliver that message clearly in a way that resonates with the buyer, whoever the buyer is, right? So how do you fix that problem when you've got sellers out there trying to build pipeline, customer success that's trying to support and grow customers, product that's building the product life cycles, and then there's this in-between zone, which everybody calls marketing, and they throw shit at marketing, and they say, build us some messaging, and nobody's ever happy. And marketing teams are laid off. They hire out external agencies. They go through these
New CMO. Right.
Yeah, again and again, they bring in this PMM agency and this PR agency and this, and they never seem happy. What is breaking in that process?
Mm-hmm. So I think you've outlined it very well in how you got us to this point of asking the question. And if you pull back the audio here and listen to what you said, everything is focused on marketing as a silo, right? Whether it's people outside the silo saying the silo's not doing what it's supposed to do, or people inside the silo potentially not asking enough information from the rest of the people on the team and just doing what they're supposed to do. So when we talk about messaging, part of the problem, and what I would do if I went into that company that you outlined, Rio, is I would ask everybody in leadership. And I think this is a project that a strong leader should do across the entire leadership team, which is ask everybody to write on a piece of paper, why are we here? Like, what do we do? Who do we solve the problems for? What are the problems that we solve? And why do we exist? Like those type of very simple questions. And if it doesn't come back with similar answers, you already have the foundation of your problem.
Yeah. Right? Or if it comes back like overly complex, or there's
it's very
dozens of use cases, which oftentimes startup companies have problems with because they're trying to figure out where they fit best and they can solve a lot of problems. Yeah.
So for 30 years, my father's been asking me, he's 93, he's been asking me, what do you do? Like, it never fails. Like, tell me.
Surveillance marketing?
I know we've been through this before, but tell me again, what do you do? And for somebody outside of ad tech and MarTech, sometimes it's really hard to convey that message without sounding like, you're doing junk mail or spam or things like that. And it's like, no, it's the opposite of that. But it really is. How do I tell the message so that it's crystal clear? But I don't want to tell it so that my 93-year-old father understands it. I want to tell the message crystal clear so that the person who has the problem immediately stops in their tracks and says, yes, I need that.
That is the hardest thing to nail, even for people like us that have been experienced in the industry. It is so hard it's almost like you have to go through this continuous sort of editing and tweaking and tuning and then feedback loops to get it right.
But ask yourself a question. I'm talking to the CEO of the business, the chief product officer, the chief customer officer, the chief sales officer. Why are we here? Like, what do we do? Who are the people? What's the problem that somebody has that we solve really well? Let's articulate that as a team. And then you bring that down into the messaging that the entire team says in a uniform way across sales, marketing, CS, RevOps. Everybody says it. You go into the product team who may never have been in front of a customer. You say, what's our messaging, right? They should talk about what the messaging is. Because if we're all saying the same message at the same time, we now can start to say, is it our messaging, our product positioning? But if I have 20 people saying something slightly different or significantly different, I'll never know whether it's my message or my product or the people who I have that I'm trying to talk to. So it's very important that this is a team effort, that we're all working together off the same messaging and ultimately the same playbook.
Hey, Mark, it's funny you bring that up. I mean, I'll give you an anecdote. So I was, this was a few years ago, this is a regional bank called me in. They had built this product that was supposed to be, initially they didn't tell me what the product was for, but they eventually showed me the product. They brought me in ostensibly saying this product is crap, hasn't gained traction because it's a bad product. We want you to look at it, audit it, let us know how we can improve the appearance, fix the UX? Are there features it's missing? It's got to have more features, right? I took a look at it. Actually, it wasn't that bad, right? But then I looked at how they were going to market. The product was this incredible concierge. So let's say you called it this regional bank, and like they could tell based on your customer profile, did you have a mortgage with them? Did you have auto loans with them? Did you have bank accounts, checking accounts, business? They knew all that, right? Mm-hmm. And it would kind of like give you like a concierge, like, and this is before AI had really taken off. So it would give you this front end where we like act as a concierge to steer you to the right place. It actually was pretty cool. I thought it worked pretty well. But then their goal was to get people to this wealth management thing. They're like, I was struggling after finally I asked the head of product, why did you put this in? Like people like your customers, they're going to have a Schwab account or a whatever, like, or an E-Trade, like that's where they're going to do all of their like day trading and their investing. I don't see them doing this with you guys. And then we went through this whole exercise, and the conclusion we had at the end of the project, Mark and Brett, was the product is fine, but like your go-to-market is completely wrong. Your messaging is wrong. Your ICP is not even close. And that was the problem. I love your comments on that.
Yeah, I wonder if was there a disconnect between how what the product envisioned, or what the product leader envisioned when building it, and then what you were actually seeing within the platform, which didn't, like, there was a disconnect in terms of the concierge service versus.
I could never find out why it happened. Brad, was more like and I think they're probably a different product people, and maybe had a product and the CMO had different ideas. And like, so I think it was just like competing interests, lack of alignment, a lot of things you see in big corporate America, but it was more like that, that lack of with the right go-to-market, I was convinced that product would do pretty well. And that was a recommendation I gave them. And that they didn't really need to invest in redoing this thing, which would have taken another year. They could go to market and probably get good traction doing this, and maybe later on find ways to steer people towards different features in it, right? So I don't know if you have any similar stories, Mark, or any thoughts on that story, but I just thought for me that just hit home how important go-to-market is.
Well, for an established bank like that, especially a regional bank that would have a lot of local people coming in and out of the bank, they have a relationship with the customer. Many times just ask your customers, is this something that would help? It sounds to me like as they were building the product, somebody was looking at what other companies do, maybe some of the larger ones, and wealth management was in there, and, a couple of other buzzwords, and they decided to put that all together, not thinking about who they were actually targeting. And if part of the feedback from the existing customers were, we love working with our local bank, and is there any way you can help us with our wealth management instead of us going to some, huge conglomerate to do it, then that's the product.
Yeah, then there's a market need. Yeah.
But many times what you'll find is that if you dig into it, somebody will say, well, that's what the CEO said we had to do.
Yeah, that's where we're going to make the money. This whole concierge service is nice, but it's not going to make us any money. The only way we know how to make money is potentially this wealth management thing.
And that's really where this loop comes back and forth. And it may be that driver. You're absolutely right, Brett. Look, all these other things we already do. Like people just walk in, they use the ATM, they use that. Why would we need this? Oh, well, it'll only work if we do that. Well, nobody in product then said, well, let's go out and actually identify, is there a market that we could be in front of that need all of this and would want to buy it from us, right? So all day, every day, you need to identify the buyer's current comfort level with going with you, right?
Yeah.
And is it that it's new? Is it like, what's my ability to A, believe that you can deliver on this, B, that I want to move what I can do, and C, that there's enough of those people to warrant going to market with that product.
Yeah. And it all goes back to where it all breaks first, is that voice of customer, not to take that word out of the clouds, but the actual needs of customers. And at a regional bank, you would think Rio would want a level of trust with their regional bank, right? Like, hey, it's in my market area. I want to know that they know me. They know things about me that I don't, that are trusted within this relationship. But it seems like the wealth management was like a leap too far.
I think you're right, Brett. I think you nailed it. I think what probably happened, they apparently had done some research, but I think what happened is the research didn't get interpreted the right way, or maybe got interpreted different ways by different people. And I think some senior person came in and said, we're gonna become like we're gonna start selling people more like wealth management or like I don't know, like it didn't make any like I didn't think that was their sweet spot, and it certainly wasn't. And I thought, I mean, there were all these other great services they were offering that they could have upsold and cross-sold people very easily with this, right? So I actually thought that was a great opportunity to get this thing really sticking, to build a better customer experience. This could have been like really the digital front door for people as they work with the bank instead of like all these other different websites and apps and stuff they had. So I actually thought it was a missed opportunity. And that's kind of the recommendation they gave them for that. But I think you're right. I think it's either not enough research, Mark, or misconstruing the research, maybe not getting the right learnings from the research.
Yeah, and especially early on of it, it just reminds me. It's the idea of you nail who your buyer or buyer types are in their specific use cases, and getting to especially with early stage companies, getting simple fast. I find is the hardest thing. So oftentimes there's a lot of noise, and usually the dollars drive that behavior. You start to see certain use cases generating interest amongst your clients, certain specific buyers saying, I've got that problem. Can you help me solve that problem? And then you have the sort of domino effect. Let's sell more of that. Let's lean in there. But that could just be the activity of a specific salesperson, a specific PM, as opposed to something that's consistent across the commercial organization. Once you get to that point of clarity, though, I think it's about really zeroing in and ensuring that you're hyper-focused. And I think the best early stage companies are hyper-focused in that way.
Another aspect of problem market fit versus product market fit. Problem market fit, it goes back to the heroic sales efforts, that all of our sales are coming from just a couple of salespeople. And because to get to product market fit, my entire sales team should be able to sell this, right? It's not just the one person. And to the point you were just talking about, Rio, when it comes down to it, it's how do I identify that there's actually a need in the marketplace for what I'm doing? And that was, in my opinion, that regional bank's opportunity to try to get to platform market fit, but they didn't do enough analysis on their customer base.
Yeah.
But if we switch over to B2B, and because I know this audience, if there's a lot of people in ad tech and MarTech, it's heavily B2B oriented in driving revenue for the companies. And it all comes down to proof, facts, and evidence. Right. There are many great storytellers in our industry that can go out and pitch something, tell a story, get an audience to feel like this is great. But at the end of the day, you need facts and evidence that go back to, why should I buy this? Why do I believe that this solves my problem? Because the hurdle that you're getting over isn't just, I don't see enough ROI in this, or, I have a contract with somebody else. I don't need it for 6 months. It's fear. More often than not, your buyers have a level of fear about what you're talking about. Not just, will this work and is my job on the line, but, well, this could actually take my job. Or if I bring this in and save this and improve that and do this, I've got 25 people that might not be working here.
Well, especially the AI economy, but it could also help promote them if it's doing good.
That's the twist. That's what the company who's trying to deliver on this new offering, that's what they need to do. They need to show how this helps to grow the business. And that's not just, that proof is not just one use case or one buyer example or one view of how it operates inside of a company. It's a lot of that. You have to get to a point where your proof points get you past that reason to believe. And that's when buyers, because if you're doing your job right, you're in front of the person who actually owns the problem that you address. And for all of us who have owned a lot of problems in our career, if somebody was standing in front of me who could show me facts and evidence that they can solve the problem that I'm dealing with, I'm going to spend a lot of time with
them. Yeah. That's the transition from, like, I think we're kind of moving in that path of the why. You get the first meeting. They believe that you've got something that delivers to something that's valuable to them, that's going to make them better, get them promoted, help them drive team or company KPIs. The how is now you're in front of me. Now you got to prove it, to your point, right? That's where the how do you actually do this, and show me examples with clients like me, right? Industry category like me, function. I'm a CMO, I'm a CFO, whatever it might be, like me, and getting to that point. What's your recommendation for companies that are early stage that don't necessarily have all. This is almost a classic crossing the chasm case study, right? How do you get enough of that foothold within a certain category, a certain buyer category, a certain vertical or industry, to have the proof, right? Because you're just getting started. What's your recommendation to smaller companies?
You have to create the evidence, whether it's through POCs that you're going to do or people you know. I mean, it's rare to find a set of founders who don't have a handful of people that they could just go and start doing this, or you find those early adopters that'll just buy anything because it sounds interesting. But you have to manufacture that. You have to manufacture that proof and evidence. And a lot of times today, with cloud computing and the speed that you can do things, you could take very large data sets and recreate something, that client scenario, and have your facts and evidence, and then go to them. You can pick logical proof points and bring them up. But at the end of the day, what you're up against is that today's buyers are spending all of their time doing their own research on social, on whatever they can find, through whatever model they're using to do research on the problems to solve their challenge that they have, and they're 80% of the way through deciding who they're going to talk to before they talk to anybody.
Yeah, I've got some stats to back that up. 84%, these are McKinsey and 6 Sense, a combination. 84% choose a vendor before speaking to sales. 70% do their vendor research before sales is at all involved in the process, right? So they've already shortlisted a selection of vendors. They've done a ton of research into vendor solving problem ABC. And then once they actually select a vendor, or I'm sorry, here's another fact: 78% of companies that successfully build a product and achieve some level of product market fit fail to scale, which I think that's a McKinsey quote, that the McKinsey number that I mentioned in my first GTM Slop article, which I think is really interesting, because that's saying you've built a successful product, you've got product market fit, but you may not have exact problem market fit, right? And to your point, right, your platform, why do you think that is? Why do you think companies fail to scale?
Once they get the product market fit, that's more of a go-to-market issue about the orchestration of the team. There's some solutions out there. I do advisory work for a company called Fullcast, and there's a revenue intelligence solution that can actually go in and look at all the activities that your go-to-market team has to say, how many times am I touching a given prospect in a certain period of time when I win the deals? And how many times do I touch them, or how many people am I multi-threaded with when I don't win them? Or how quickly am I bringing procurement into the organization? Or how quickly am I bringing legal in to start talking about the contract? And it's really trying to map out, how did I get those customers that help me to establish that I have product market fit, and then replicating that right across the organization. Because the difference on the sales side of things, the difference between the 10 to 15% of my salespeople that are bringing 90% of the net new revenue in, and the balance is process. It's really understanding that they've been educated on the process to do this and what works for our solution and for our ICP, because it's different across the board. That's the education that you have to have. And when I talked earlier about picking what you're going to do, going out and doing it, and collecting the evidence and analyzing the evidence, that's what you need to do. And I would venture to say that those organizations failed to have a strong and deep revenue operations team to collect the information from sales, marketing, and customer success, and the interaction of people to the brand and in the sales process to say what's working.
Yeah, and that's
Mark, we're almost at
feedback loop.
We're almost out of time here. So how about we go to the quick hits, Mark? We're, I don't know if one word answers are reasonable, but let's say several word answers, one sentence max. Question one: which go-to-market screw up do you see most often when you're doing your job?
ICP. They're trying to sell something to everybody.
Yeah, I'm gonna add a quick hit. Is how do you solve the education gap? Right, because you just clearly in your last answer talked about the gap between what product's delivering and the commercial readiness.
Look, for everybody that's listening, it's our responsibility to be self-learners. It's not our company or our organization's responsibility to teach everybody everything. So we need a team that's ready to learn on their own. Information's readily available. Now, the company does need to do learning and development, but the test is find an objective competency assessment tool for each one of the roles in your organization and measure competency, not from a perspective, I'm going to let people go, but from a perspective of where do I need to teach more, right? Then you're going to learn who in your organization wants to learn and who doesn't want to learn. And you guys can all figure out which category you want to do what with. But the next perspective is who can learn and who's having trouble learning. Because I'll spend much more time with the person who's having trouble learning, who wants to learn, than the person who doesn't want to learn.
Well, these are definitely not quick hit answers, Mark. Unfortunately, it's giving you a hard time. Don't worry about it. That was a good answer. All right. So I guess we've got time for one more, and then we'd love to hear how guests can get a hold of you, Mark. So last question. What's one sign, undeniable, that a go-to-market or a market entry plan is not ready or is going to fail?
You can't scale. You can't string together one quarter after another. That's one sign. The other piece is you're either firing people or losing people, because I doubt that everybody's bad at hiring. At the end of the day, when the system's broken, it doesn't work for the humans in the organization.
That's a really good call. I think we've all seen it in our careers at some point, right?
For sure.
Cool. So let's say, Mark, how can people get a hold of you? Let's say someone wants to talk about how do you run and go to market, some of the CRO advisory you're doing. They want to get a hold of you and Brett in HighSignals. I mean, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, the easiest way is through LinkedIn. They can find me out there. But certainly the work that Brett and I are doing with HighSignals, you're going to start hearing a lot more about us. But at the end of the day, just jump on LinkedIn, find me, and I'm happy to have a conversation.
Yep. highsignals.com. But for all those that have made it through this episode, check out signalandnoise.ai. We're constantly publishing articles. Rio's just got one coming out. He's got one or two coming out a week. I'm writing a bunch. We've got a bunch of executive contributors that are producing a ton of great new content. So check out signalandnoise.ai, as well as YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen or watch your favorite content. And we will see you next time.
Yeah, surprisingly, the amount of people actually make it through these when I look at the numbers, Brett. So it's pretty cool to see. So thanks again, everyone. Mark, it was always a pleasure.
Thank you for having
me. As usual, and thanks for coming. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both.